all, can I ask, so what happened, what's the situation earlier this week with the tip? Why did it close?
There was a break-in at the tip and some damage was done to some of the equipment. I'm not sure whether it was actually vandalism or robbery or a bit of both, but in essence what they did was they damaged some of the weighbridge equipment, and without the weighbridge we can't work out how much weight is being brought into the tip, so we needed to close the tip temporarily, and then the staff did some urgent work to try and get it back up and operational. And they actually did that fairly quickly and got to the point where we could at least open and still take electronic payments. We couldn't take cash payments until the following day. It's a bit disappointing, obviously, to see anything happen like that. This is public property we're talking about. This is owned by the residents, so residents breaking in or vandalising council property is really residents vandalising their own property, and we don't know, obviously, who did it, whether it was a resident of the Dubbo Regional Council area or not. But obviously a similar issue happened down at the Wellington depot. So for some reason, someone's decided that the waste depots are a good place to go and target.
Yeah, because I was talking with some of my colleagues and they say that this has happened before, people breaking into the tip and smashing things up. From what you've described, it sounds like they did quite a number on this one, right? So they broke the weighbridge machine. They also broke the FPOS or whatever system that they use to take card payments. So by the sounds of it was quite extensive damage, is that right?
Yeah, it was extensive damage. And again, it's hard to know the mindset of someone that breaks into something like that, whether or not it was purely just trying to steal money and they decided to break some things while they were there, whether vandalism was their main target and they stole some things while they're there as well. But the reality is it's not as if our waste depots are like a bank. It's not as if there's a huge amount of cash there. The equipment there is very specific, very specialised for the tip. So I can't see a lot of value in stealing some of that equipment. So whether it's just a robbery, hoping for a bit of cash out there and being disappointed when they found not much cash there and then decided to wreck a few things, it is hard to understand the mindset of someone that does break in or does vandalise something.
And you mentioned that it happened before in Wellington. Did you guys ever get to the bottom of that? Did they find out who did it? And was there any CCTV footage, for example? Did you have an idea of who it was?
No, that only happened. It was only recently that happened, and I'm going to estimate it was within the last fortnight that it happened in Wellington. So those investigations are still continuing. I'm only guessing, obviously, to think that it might have been the same people who did both. It might be coincidental. Maybe someone heard about the Wellington Waste Depot and decided that it would be a good idea to do the Dubbo Waste Depot. So no information about either at this stage. We do have CCTV at both sites, so it's a matter of going through those and looking at what the police can glean from that information. So investigations are continuing. Obviously, we hope that they do catch the perpetrator or perpetrators at both, and we'll basically get those facilities back up and running as per normal as quickly as possible. And they are operational now. It's a matter of fixing up the other damages that occurred there.
Absolutely. And the other thing I was hoping to ask you about was the erosion in Wellington, just down by the river. I was having a look at some of the photos of, before and after, as it were. So quite a sort of large chunk of land and a large chunk of road that was just swept down the river. I understand that there was a report in 2018 saying that there was a quote-unquote high risk of something like this happening. Is that right?
That's exactly right. There was a report that Council asked for in March. There was a Council resolution at the March 2018 meeting asking for an urgent report to be looked into around some specific areas of the river, and in particular the area there where the Bell River joins to the Macquarie River. And so that report was commissioned. Soil Conservation Service did that report, and that report that I've seen is dated November 2018. So presumably Council received that report at some stage around November, maybe just shortly after that particular date in 2018. And then there was a workshop, a Council workshop in February, on the 4th of February 2019, where councillors obviously discussed that report, and I don't have information about the exact discussions at that particular meeting, at that particular workshop. But the most disappointing part about that was that it was decided by the councillors back in 2019, in February 2019, to take no further action. And when you look at that report, it does identify that particular area, that erosion area, as a high priority area. It estimated that there so far had been about 3 metres a year had been eroded in the recent past, and they particularly identified the floods of 2010 and 2016 as events that increased the erosion quite dramatically. The report did say they estimated that at the ongoing rates of erosion, it may be somewhere in the vicinity of 10 years, as soon as 10 years, maybe as long as 20 years in a best case scenario, before that erosion would get to the point where Gabollion Street, that feeds down on the southern side of the Duke of Wellington Bridge, would eventually be impacted by that erosion. Now, obviously, when that report was written, it was written with the knowledge of 2018, and that was, as you would well remember, in the middle of a drought. 2018 still very much in the grips of a drought, which continued all through 2019 and into 2020. The Soil Conservation Service couldn't have known the flood events that we would have this year. So even though they said it might be 10 to 20 years, 4 years later, we've obviously got that high levels of erosion. That the really unfortunate part is the time to take action would have been when we had that drought, because obviously there were very low flows of water in the river, and that would have made the work that was recommended in that report much easier to undertake. It would be ridiculous to try and undertake that work now because you've got such high flows. This group of councillors were not made aware of that report until August this year, and at that stage there was no way we could take any action because of those high flows of water going through the river. It would need to be low flows and then make a decision to do some work on it. But now it's too late for any of those preventative measures, and the fix of that, as it's so often the case, prevention is better than cure. The fix will be dramatically more expensive than any of that prevention work would have been.
Yeah, right. As a result of the previous sort of council's inaction, I was going to ask what the reason was for the putting that off, that work off. But you're saying that that's not clear at this stage, just from the meeting. So that was it a closed meeting when they made that decision?
The workshop would have been a closed meeting. The council meetings are public, but from that workshop, they didn't even take any report through to a council meeting, and I don't quite understand that, given the fact that the resolution of council in March 2018 was for an urgent report to be delivered. It seemed like there was some urgency, which I agree with the urgency from 2018. It seemed like councillors were very much aware of there were some issues there and needed to find out exactly what needed to be done. That report was delivered as they'd asked for, and then after the workshop, obviously councillors decided to take no further action, and I don't really understand that. And I can't really answer the question as to why. You'd have to really go back and talk to individual councillors that were on council at the time. I don't understand why something wouldn't have been done about it.
Yeah, sure. I was speaking with the GM, and they said that it's going to take quite a lot of time to do an engineer's report and to sort of tally up the damages and to sort of come up with options for ways forward. Obviously, it's still quite early days, but are there any sort of vague ideas of what council might do or possible options that council might have in terms of either replacing the bridge or doing something else? Do you know at this stage?
Well, at this stage, the bridge itself seems to be structurally sound, but again, I'm saying that just by a visual inspection. I'm not an engineer and I haven't gone and done any engineering tests on that. So the first thing we'll do is get some engineers to do some actual tests on the bridge and the condition of that bridge. It may turn out that the bridge is still in reasonable condition. It may turn out the bridge has been compromised, but that's step one. Step two is obviously you can see with the naked eye the erosion on the road, in particular the southern entrance to that particular bridge. And obviously you can't say that there doesn't need to be some dramatic work that needs to be done there. Now, to go and restore that road is not going to be a cheap process. And that will be where council will need to get some information to say how much would it cost for us to restore that road, to fill that road back in, and then put some sort of fortification in that would allow that to withstand that ongoing flow of water, which obviously should have been done in the first place. So that's going to be an expensive process. So that'll be something to look at. Is moving the bridge an option? Is closing that road altogether an option? There are a number of options we need to consider, but the first we need to look at is just get some engineering information about that bridge and about the area around that first before we even think about what decisions, what options we might have.
Yeah, right. Is not having any sort of second bridge an option? Because I was talking with some locals and they said that they've previously been caught out by having only one bridge, and then that bridge goes down, and effectively they're cut off on one side of the river, and they had to sort of bring in a military pontoon as a sort of temporary measure. So I'm assuming, does there need to be like a separate sort of alternative route, I guess, even if council doesn't end up replacing that bridge?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And one of the things that we need to look at is that, yes, that bridge collapse, and from memory that was way back about 1989 that bridge collapsed, and it did leave Wellington cut off. And that was a very dramatic set of circumstances. The military did come in and they put a pontoon bridge in, so you're quite correct there, and that gave them a temporary crossing. And then the Duke of Wellington Bridge was built while the main bridge on the Mitchell Highway was being rebuilt. So it was a good outcome eventually for Wellington, where there were two river crossings in Wellington. And I think that's been an excellent arrangement for Wellington up to this point in time. The replacement of the second bridge there, just in case the first bridge goes under or collapses one day, is a fairly limited set of circumstances, but you would have said that before 1989 as well. You wouldn't have expected that bridge to collapse at some stage. So that'll be one of the options we'll consider. Personally, at this stage, I'm not keen on seeing only one bridge crossing for Wellington. Having said that, I haven't got all the information or the data to be able to make a sensible decision on that. So it really is one of those things that we need to wait for the information, wait for the various options, and the dollars will come into that process as well, what the actual cost will be. One of the things that's also interesting out of all of this is that the state government will give a local government, local councils, money to repair what they've got after flood damage. So if there's a road that's damaged, or if there's a bridge that's damaged due to a flood, then that will be something that will be covered. So the first instance you might say, well, the state government will cover the cost. But the state government might also say that this wasn't a direct result of this flood. This was a result of inaction by council, so they may not cover the cost of recovery of that. And there's so many unknowns with this situation at this stage. It is very difficult to say what might happen, but we've really got to wait for some information to come through, get some reports, get some options, and then have that discussion with the community as well, because it will cost some money somewhere. And in terms of dollars, it's really about prioritising funds through council and seeing what might need to be done.
Absolutely. Excellent.
Thank you very much.